After a single man passed away, the locals discovered the astounding secret about his life. Throughout the world, there are countless people who, whether by choice or not, go through their lives alone without partners or children. Alan Naiman was one such solitary individual before he sadly passed away from cancer in January 2018. Following his death, however, the local community uncovered an unbelievable secret about his existence. A resident of Seattle, Washington, Naiman worked at a bank before making an interesting career switch in the late 1980s. He decided to train as a social worker, you see, after which he joined Washington's Department of Social and Health Services. But the changes in Naiman's life didn't end there, as the singleton also looked for further opportunities outside of his new position. Yes, Naiman took on additional work at a few other jobs while plying his trade in the social work game. But despite certainly keeping busy, the former banker was an incredibly private individual. Naiman was apparently known for being extremely frugal too, spending very little money on himself. It seems as though the man may have had a very good reason for keeping his cards close to his chest, however. That's because Naiman's older brother, Daniel, suffered from a developmental disability, with the social worker looking after him as a result. And in the opinion of one of Naiman's pals, said responsibility truly shaped his life. Growing up as a kid with an older, disabled brother kind of colored the way he looked at things, Susan Madsen told the Associated Press in December 2018. What's more, as a community worker, Naiman dealt with a number of young people living with disabilities too, and this in turn apparently fueled his love of kids. Although the Seattle native didn't have a wife or girlfriend with whom to start a family then, he did become a foster parent for a time, and it seems as though this experience had a profound effect on the man. The kids who came into care got into Naiman's heart. Mary Monahan, one of Naiman's fellow social workers, told BBC News in December 2018. Another aspect of Naiman's life that his friends and peers picked up on was his frugality, which apparently led the man to make some curious choices. For instance, Naiman opted against buying new footwear. Instead, he fixed his old worn-out shoes using tape. But Naiman's thrifty ways didn't stop there. He also purchased many of his outfits from Costco and made his money go further by collecting coupons and hunting for bargains. What's more, when treating a pal to a bite to eat, the former foster parent would often choose a cheap option such as a junk food restaurant. And yet, curiously, Naiman's economizing nature was by no means a reflection of his financial status. The man was reportedly earning just under $70,000 a year at work. In fact, and that's not to mention his other jobs on the side. But one of Naiman's old banking buddies, Shashi Karen, lifted the lid on the youth worker's seemingly contradictory relationship with cash. Saving money was sort of a game to Naiman, Karen revealed to CNN in December 2018. He'd brag about how he had a whole day out and didn't have to spend a single cent. Even so, in 2013, Naiman briefly brought an end to said game following a heartbreaking personal tragedy. You see, Naiman's brother, Daniel, sadly passed away that year, and the loss seemingly prompted the Seattle native to dip into his financial reserves to buy himself a present, a flashy vehicle. Yet, even with this splurge, Naiman appeared to be holding back with his spending. It's a nice little sports car, but it's not a Mustang or a Corvette or a Porsche that Naiman easily could have afforded, Karen pointed out. That said, the new ride was certainly a far cry from the social worker's prior worn-out vehicles. In addition, Naiman would take budget road trips instead of vacations, practically all of which he would embark on alone. It's perhaps understandable then that even those closest to Naiman may have felt as though they never fully knew him. Karen, for instance, was friends with the man for over 30 years, and yet there are still areas of his life that remain a mystery. I don't know if Naiman was lonely, the former banker's colleague told the Associated Press. I think he was a loner. So it's perhaps fair to assume that the events that followed Naiman's cancer diagnosis came as a surprise to those around him. Knowing that his days were numbered, you see, the community worker started to put his life in order, and one group were certainly taken aback by his actions. Treehouse, a Washington-based organization that helps young people in foster care, received a payment of $5,000 out of the blue from Naiman, and understandably, the donation caught a lot of people off guard. Jessica Ross, in charge of development at Treehouse, certainly noticed Naiman's gesture anyway. She also revealed that the donations they received rarely go above a few $100, a total that Naiman's payment blew out of the water. "That's a big deal for us," Ross told BBC News. "We were surprised by that." However, the biggest revelations were yet to come. You see, after Naaman sadly succumbed to his cancer in January 2018, his peers made an incredible discovery about his life. It turns out, in fact, that there was a colossal secret Naaman had managed to keep hidden from practically everyone he'd known. Remarkably, despite Naaman's penny-pinching ways, he had actually possessed an enormous fortune, one in the region of $11 million, no less. The former banker had made several investments for one, using the money he had earned at work. Meanwhile, he'd also received a sizable amount from his parents, according to his friend Karen. In fact, Naaman had apparently inherited millions of dollars from his late dad, which had added nicely to his growing personal fortune. In an interesting twist, though, Karen was one of the only select few who had known about the youth worker's vast sums of money. And the old friend was able to shed some light, too, on why Naaman had felt such a reluctance to splash his cash. Naaman was just that kind of guy that he couldn't just spend money, Karen told CNN. It was just in his nature to save the money and put it aside. I think he always knew that he was going to leave his money to charity. Indeed, Naaman had previously shared his charitable intentions with yet another of his buddies, although he hadn't let on just how hefty the donation would be. I think everyone was shocked, that Naaman had so much money to give away, his colleague Monahan said to BBC News. And although, she added, Naaman had previously suggested that people will be surprised at the amount he had to donate, perhaps no one had anticipated just how rich the man actually was. Yeah, people were, I'm sure, very surprised at Naaman's wealth, Monahan continued. But where exactly did all of his cash end up? Well, as per Naaman's will, his $11 million fortune was divided up and given to different nonprofit associations. Among those to benefit from his extreme kindness were Make-A-Wish, Alaska and Washington, Child Haven, and the Little Bit Therapeutic Riding Center. And then Naaman had left Treehouse another sizable donation, one that far surpassed the sum that they had received prior to his death. This time, Naaman gifted Treehouse around $900,000, which understandably stunned everyone at the organization. But as it turned out, there was a poignant reason behind Naaman's generosity towards the nonprofit. During his stint as a foster parent, you see, the social worker had taken his children to Treehouse's facility. And while there, he'd picked up some of the free toys on offer. Once again, Ross was left speechless by Naaman's donation. "Our organization was just overcome with that kindness and that love," she told BBC News. "I don't want the number to outweigh the experience of being a part of this, which was really about the way he wanted to leave the world." Naaman's money, it seems, will be used to extend Treehouse's charitable efforts even further for the youth of Washington. And Ross couldn't help but sing the man's praises even further. The frugality that he lived through, that he committed to in his life, was for this, she told the Associated Press. "It's really a gift to all of us to see that pure demonstration of philanthropy and love." These organizations aren't the only ones to have benefited from Naaman's fortune, though. Yes, the ex-banker donated a giant $2.5 million to yet another cause, the Pediatric Interim Care Center, PIC. Apparently, Naaman had worked with the nursery a few years before he died, and much as with Treehouse, he hadn't stopped at just one generous donation. In fact, PIC highlighted the extent of Naaman's kindness in a heartfelt tribute on its website. "We first became aware of Naaman's generosity last fall when we received a $10,000 donation from him online," the statement read. "Thinking that large amount might be a mistake, we called him to make sure he'd entered the right number of zeros." After reassuring PIC that the figure was indeed correct, Naaman had promised that he'd be sending the charity even more money down the line. What's more, the care center had subsequently received some touching information about Naaman. He later wrote us a letter telling us about a connection to PIC that had started many years ago, the organization explained in its online tribute. "It went back to a night many years ago when Naaman was a social worker at the Department of Social and Health Services," PIC's statement continued. "He was desperate to find a home to place a fragile baby that had been brought into his office late that evening. And thankfully, Naaman had received that help that he needed from Barbara Drennan, PIC's founder. It was after midnight when he called Barbara Drennan, asking her if she could come to his office in Seattle to pick up this little one," the tribute went on. To his great relief, Barbara came and took the baby. However, the connection between Naaman and Drennan didn't end there, as the man's social work had often brought him back to PIC. Later, there were other times when Naaman needed help for a baby, the Post continued, and Barbara and Pediatric Interim Care Center were always there for him and for the babies. He never forgot. Then Pick revealed exactly how Naaman's $2.5 million donation was going to be spent. Thanks to the kind-hearted man, the center was able to purchase some new transportation with which to pick up infants from the local hospitals. Yet this isn't the only way in which Naaman's selfless gestures helped towards the charity's long-term survival. When Naaman died in January, he left a portion of his wealth to care for the babies at Pediatric Interim Care Center, the tribute continued. Naaman's kindness allowed Pick to pay off the mortgage on our building, giving babies a safe place of their own for many years to come.